on this episode of 2036, the podcast.
I think for climate change, we really need to figure out how can we grow food in a way that's much more environmentally friendly. So there's a lot of organic farming, but also can we use less fertilizers? Can we use less pesticides? I think those are interesting questions. And then what's the agricultural practice that is going to lead to less environmental pollution is what we're trying to get at.
Welcome to 2036, the podcast Season 3. I'm Ken Carter, professor of psychology at Emory University's Oxford College, and today I'm here with Dr. Eri Saikawa. Dr. Saikawa is the Winship Distinguished Research Professor of Environmental Sciences in the Department of Environmental Sciences at Emory College of Arts and Sciences. She holds a joint appointment in the Rollins School of Public Health as a professor of environmental health. She's also the director of graduate studies and of the Emory Climate Talks Initiative. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
So you run the Saikawa Lab, where you study the sources and magnitude of air and soil pollution. One of the lab's primary initiatives is to encourage and to facilitate citizen science, which sounds really fascinating. So what is citizen science, and how does your lab help with that?
Yeah, so we actually try to also call it as community science because I'm not a citizen, and then sometimes there has been a lot of discussion about what is citizen science versus what is community science. So what we really try to do is to get different stakeholders involved, and that means the residents, and then different, for example, the middle school, high school students, and anybody that wants to be involved in science, because science doesn't have to be for scientists only.
Great. So how are the students involved? Like, how are these scientists involved?
Yeah, so it was so interesting. One of the undergrad students actually came to me and said that he wanted to set up air quality monitoring network on campus after the class. And for that class, we have a midterm project where we go to a middle school and students teach them what air pollution is and how we can potentially monitor air quality. And through that, students decided to apply for a grant. Wow. And then we initially got an internal grant, but then we also received an EPA grant later on. And so that's an environmental education grant where the students can actually do an outreach projects together with middle school and high school students. And so that's how we started. And now it's for air and also for soil contamination as well.
So what kind of data are they gathering?
Yeah, so we have local air quality sensors set up in different schools in Atlanta. But we also have what's called Community Science Soil Shop. And we ask people to collect soil samples themselves and bring it to us where we have this event. And then we would test the soil for lead. Oh. So it's like a screening mechanism. And then they can get the results right away. So that's one of the events that we host quite a lot.
I mean, it sounds like it's something that could really inspire future scientists as well.
That's what we hope, right? And, how can we make the young kids excited about science and that they would be wanting to go into that field? And that's really a hope for us. And with the students being passionate about it and teaching the younger generation, I think is a really nice way.
So among a lot of your initiatives that you're doing, soil health stands out. So what is soil health and why is it important?
Yeah, soil health is a really big buzzword. And so I think I'm not a soil scientist. And in soil science, they use it for very different ways. But for us, it became very important because we found a lot of lead contamination in the west side of Atlanta. And we are growing food from soil. And so if the soil is not healthy, then what we eat growing out of that soil can be unhealthy too. And so we wanted to make people aware of the potential soil contamination that exists because we are in the city. And then by being aware, hopefully people would be able to take some action. Like washing hands, is the easy thing. But soil health can also be a very different meaning it's usually used for like climate realm, like how much carbon is sequestered in the ground. Because if there is a lot more carbon in the ground, then that helps for climate change. So we work on two different areas. One is to really figure out the way to sequester more carbon, and then also reduce emissions of greenhouse gases. And then on the other hand, to make sure that the soil is healthy to grow food.
So it sounds like there may be some contaminants in the soil, like lead from things that we're doing to the soil, but it also sounds like there might be things related to our climate health as well.
Yeah, that's right. So if the soil is healthy, then that would be both good for us humans and then also for the planet. But it's also very complicated, so it's very difficult to achieve as well.
So what can we do to help improve soil health? It sounds like it's something really important. Can an everyday person help with that?
Yeah, so I think if there is a lot of contamination, then that's very important to get rid of it. So we've also tried to use plants to take up heavy metals. That wasn't as effective as we would like, and there's a lot of research on that. Right now, what the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, is doing is to really just take up all the contaminated soil and put the clean soil in. That's the easiest and the most expensive solution. I think for climate change, we really need to figure out how can we grow food in a way that's much more environmentally friendly. So there's a lot of organic farming, but also can we use less fertilizers? Can we use less pesticides? I think those are interesting questions. And then what's the agricultural practice that is going to lead to less environmental pollution is what we're trying to get at.
Are there certain kinds of plants that are better for soil health? Like if I'm doing things in my own yard, like...
Yeah, so we've been looking a lot on corn because corn is grown a lot in Georgia. And usually it's bare soil and then just growing corn with a lot of fertilizer. And so what we've been interested in is if we put white clover together, can it serve as nitrogen fertilizer so that you don't have to put as much synthetic fertilizer? And would they also reduce emissions of greenhouse gases? It's not as simple as we had hoped. There is emissions that come out from the white clover plot as well. But we are seeing that there's much more sequestration that happens from that kind of practice. And over the long term, we hope that that is going to get to better soil and then also for better plant growth. So that's what we are trying to look at. So if you are interested, like you can put clovers and then that can actually take up nitrogen and then provide nitrogen to the soil so you can have less fertilizer as well.
Yeah, actually, interestingly, I have been planting a clover lawn in my backyard. So
Yeah?
now I didn't know.
So you knew already.
No, I was just easier than grass.
Yeah,
So,
that's really cool though.
But it sounds like it actually might be helping in some way. That's good to know.
Yeah. Is it annual clover or perennial? Do you know?
I do not know.
Okay. Yeah, so there are different kinds of clovers, but that's so cool.
Yeah, I was actually amazed by how deep the root system is in clovers. So,
So that can really help the carbon too.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Great. Thank you. And what about in government and industry? Like what can they do with to help with make our soil health a priority?
Yeah, so for me, what's really been important for the contamination side is to make the standard more stringent. So the lead standard for soil right now is 400 parts per million. That's milligram per kilogram. I think that is too high. We need to have it much lower because there's no safe level of lead for children. And so we need to really have a more stringent standard that can provide the children more safe place to live and play. And I think we need to do more testing because otherwise we don't know. For example, the universal care, I think for lead testing would be so important. Right now, not all the kids are tested for lead. And we miss a lot of kids that are exposed because of that. And I think that's such a simple fix. So, and then there's a lot of money put in for climate smart agriculture right now. So that would be interesting for actually creating soil health. But in a way, for that, I feel government, the carbon markets are going before the science. So that also has to be a little bit, it's a little bit complex, I feel. We need to know more science in some sense too.
We've talked a little bit about soil, but I also want to talk a little bit about air quality too. How does air quality affect health outcomes?
Yeah, air pollution kills people. So every year, about 5 million people are considered to die because of air pollution, both from ambient and indoor air pollution.
Are there particular groups of people who are at risk for health issues that are related to poor air quality?
Yeah, I think the people that are usually in the underserved communities in the US, so those are people of color, low income, they would be living next to or closer to hazardous waste sites, etc., that have more pollution. And in the global south, because of the low income levels, they are also facing a lot of air pollution too.
What about things that everyday people can do to improve air quality? What are some things that can be helpful?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of the students always talk about traffic, and that is one of the very big problems in Atlanta and in the US. So if you drive less, then that's of course going to be good. But then I think we also need to think about like the food waste, for example, leads to a lot of pollution too. And some people are now finding how you cook at home is also making a big difference, even in the US. So what we work on in the global south is really trying to look at how much biofuel impacts, like biofuel burning impacts air pollution. And one of the projects that we are working on in Guatemala is the plastic burning that happen in the household. They are using it as a starter for the fuel, like burning in the cook stoves. So that can be really toxic.
So I didn't know that people sometimes use plastics to start fire. Is that the thing that's related to the air quality?
Yeah, so the reason why they use plastics is because it's so abundant, and then there is no infrastructure like in the US to recycle. And even in the US, like recycling plastics is such a big problem. Only about 6% is actually recycled, that they say. So in those countries where they don't have the infrastructure, what they end up doing is either burning or either putting it, in the landfill, or they go to the river or to the ocean. And they use it to burn in this case because it's free, but it's also, literally, it burns well. So it's a very good starter of the fire. But then what happens though is it's a lot of toxic chemicals being released from that. And so then we are very concerned about the exposure to especially women and the children that get exposed to that kind of fire.
What about government and industry? What can they do to help improve air quality?
So I think the industry, I feel in this case, the petrochemical industry has been trying to, stay alive with this fossil fuel, divestment, et cetera, movement. They shifted to plastics. And plastics are very useful, but then they are also very terrible for the environment and for human health. So I think there needs to be a bit more government regulations. And so much of the waste actually go to the global south. And then they are sometimes burning that to create power. Like waste to energy has become a buzzword. And I think there is just so much bad impacts for doing that.
So during the pandemic, many people were encouraged and often required to work from home and limit in-person interactions with other people and limit the trips that they took. So one result from that was that we had a marked but very short reduction in global emissions, but these gains are kind of gone now. Are there any workable solutions that you see to make more meaningful long-term reductions in emissions?
Yeah, so you talk about something really interesting. So what happened with the COVID, PM, particulate matter emissions dropped so much, but then because of that, the PM concentrations decreased, but then also nitrogen oxides decreased as well because of the traffic, and then ozone increased because it's a nonlinear process. So air quality in some sense improved, but then in other sense it decreased. And for carbon dioxide, it dropped a little bit and then it came back back up really quickly. So I thought that COVID really told us that what we are doing right now is so not enough, and we have to reduce emissions, especially the greenhouse gas emissions, so much more if we wanted to reach this Paris Agreement goal, which is to keep the global temperature only 2 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. We are already 1.1 degree above the pre-industrial level, and then off to go way above the 2 degrees. I am worried that we are not doing it quick enough. And there's just so much missed opportunities in the decades.
But I think what it also shows us is that those behaviors can make a huge difference in what happens to our air quality.
Yeah, that's true. So the behaviors definitely, if we can sustain it, there is definitely a possible reduction in air pollution. But then even from that, the CO2 drop that we saw, it didn't really turn into a mixing ratio concentration decrease. So air quality and climate change is interlinked and a little bit different, but I think we do need to do so much more to improve air quality and then also decrease the climate change impact.
So there is a significant portion of our population that either dismisses climate change or argues that it's not as important as some of the economic kinds of gains that we can have without paying attention to it. How would you address those individuals?
I think that's a very good question, and I don't have a perfect answer for that. But I feel in this world, it's so complex. We have different views, and that's okay. We can disagree, but then how can we engage the people that we don't necessarily have the same opinions with? And that's probably where the higher education can really come in. And Emory can really train students to be able to discuss a complex problem in a way that's going to be constructive. Because what happened for us is that, sometimes, okay, they are climate deniers. What's the point of talking to them? I feel that that's what's happening right now. But instead, if we could talk about why are you climate deniers? What can potentially make us talk about climate? I think that's so much more constructive. And because the temperature is rising, for example, the rural farmers in Georgia, they never wanted to talk about climate, but because that's really impacting them, having the yield loss, etc., they are now willing to talk about that, not as a climate change issue, but what they see in their farms. So if we can start talking about what everybody is experiencing in their own ways, that might be more meaningful than talking about, are you a climate denier or do you believe in climate change? Because it's not really about the belief per se and what we can share on the same topic.
I mean, climate has such an impact on so many areas of our life. When we think about the climate changing, people normally think about sort of weather impact and those kinds of things. But it can also impact our health as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And you hold a joint appointment between in the Rollins School of Public Health as well. Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between climate and health?
Yeah, so I think climate and health has become such an important issue, and it's really nice that people are realizing that because of climate change, there's going to be extreme heat days and potentially extreme cold days too. And heat kills people so much more than other extreme events. And so people being aware of that and then how that is going to affect our own body and what can we do, that's so much more constructive than thinking about, climate change is going to lead to more flood. Because the flooding, I think, unless you're in the coastal region and you face flooding all the time, that's really far away from you. But I think we are experiencing a lot of hot days, extremely hot days, and that can change people's perspective sometimes.
Yeah, as the climate increases, I have friends that are living in places that aren't as aggressively air conditioned as Atlanta is.
Yeah.
But not everyone has access to air conditioning in a place like Atlanta that's already warm. What does it mean for those individuals to be in a place that could be even hotter than it normally is without access to cooling?
Yeah, I think Atlanta is such an interesting city because there is a lot of people in the low-income neighborhoods whose energy burden is so high. And we say energy burdened area when the people pay more than 6% of their income for their electricity. And Atlanta is pretty well known for that. And obviously those people are being hit because, first of all, they don't have income. And then second of all, they have to choose between, are they going to have medication, or are they going to have food, or are they going to have the AC? And that's, I think, a very difficult choice. And then if they don't have the AC, and if you're elderly or if they already have health problems, then they are the ones that are hit the most. So we really have to think about what can we do for those people. And like cooling centers, creating cooling centers to create the community space. I think that's really important too, but there is so much more that we should be doing.
So I want to talk about Earth Day. So Earth Day started back in 1970, and that's like over 50 years ago. What do you like? What gains do you feel like we've made since that first Earth Day, in sort of recognition of like how this connection between humans and the planet?
Yeah, I feel like if we had worked more since then, we would be in a better world. But I think Earth Day is still so important. We can use it to enhance, like raising awareness of the issues that are happening on the Earth. But I also feel that every day should be on Earth Day rather than just one day in the year, because thinking about that, like how the Earth for one day is really not enough. And so, that's my take on it.
So this is called 2036, the podcast. We're thinking about what Emory will be in the year 2036. As the year 2036 comes closer, what are some sort of everyday things that we can do to make the Earth as healthy as possible for those people who are going to graduate in 2036?
Yeah, I think I want more people to talk about climate change and then talk about the environment that they live in, because talking is so much more meaningful than anything else. We talk every day about different things, and if we can share our knowledge to more people about the environment, that's going to increase awareness, and then also hopefully people will take action. Students at Emory are really passionate, and they really focus on climate action. And so hopefully that can go into a larger community by them spreading the message to the world.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you.
To learn more about 2036, Emory's campaign to transform the future, visit 2036.emory.edu.